Okay, little business item we need to take care of up front if we could. Clerk Segrist is out of town this week as scheduled, and therefore we need to have a motion to make Treasurer Slavens our temporary clerk for this meeting only.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion as presented, state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Congratulations, Madam Treasurer Clerk. If you could, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Trustee Anthony.
Present.
Trustee Foster. Hello. Trustee Hudak, Graham Hudak.
Good evening.
Let the record show Clerk Segrist is not here. Treasurer Slavens here. Trustee Snyderman
Hello, everyone.
and Supervisor Williams.
Hello. Okay, would like to make one slight amendment to the agenda as presented here this evening. I'd like to make a request that a motion be presented to approve the agenda with the adjustment of moving public comment to the first item on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion as presented, please state aye.
Aye.
Is there any public comment? Mr. Miller, please. I'd like to give you, if you come to the podium, 3 minutes public comment, please.
Are we allowed 5 minutes?
No, sir. I'm requesting.
Okay, I'd like my
respectfully-
full 3 minutes.
Yes, sir.
George Miller, Briarfield and Canton. I entered a petition tonight for excavating companies doing work on the water main on Briarfield Street, for them to stand good for tearing up the street. They got a 15-ton front end loader cleaning up the street. And every expansion joint they hit, they're shearing it. We just, as citizens out here, paid maybe approximately 25% out of our own pockets at homeowners associations and getting some of the pavement paved in these subdivisions. And this contractor has a free hand. I can't understand why, if his excavating machine is on cleats and it rolls up and down the road without throwing plywood in front of it 25 or 30 feet, or 25 or 30 feet in the back without tearing up the road. Edison and other contractors do this, we see it. Now, that subject. 28th May, Police Department. This address, you had a call to my residence around 10 o'clock. In fact, you need to get your story straight when you write a letter. Because I was over there and wrote a grievance at 12, and your letter says that I told you that my dogs were out of town. And that wasn't done till 6 o'clock in the morning when I come back and told you. I'm underneath the impression, and that letter says at 10 o'clock you left when I told you the dogs weren't there. They were out of town. I didn't tell you that the dogs were missing till 6 o'clock, and I want a recording of the front desk recorder. Because that's what was said. And your shift commander on the 28th didn't want to hear the issue when I had the people delivering the dogs in Ohio. They could have got a hold of him and end the whole thing right there on a phone call, but he was too busy. Okay, now, to the dump issue. I don't know what's going there. Just like I've said before, let it be known, that dump, that outfit has, whoever's running them, has 30 years, and they can let it go back. And the county gets it, and any township can't get tax revenue out of that municipality if they let it go back. If they sit on it for 30 years, they're required to do that, I understand. Then they go down, and they're not allowed to go over and build on it either. Riverview's having problems with ski lifts going down through the liner. That's why that was redone down there through the years. Now, you can welcome these sites. We were lied to years ago, the weepers, the catch-as leachate system was supposed to be on the outside of the dump, your DNR. And DEQ was mentioned at meetings. When Mr. Poole was here and before. Now the weepers are on the inside, and the water, the leachate system, and the state goes over there, and they're depending on whoever's running the dump when it's dumping it into the sewer system, and they have a permit to do that. They're depending on that outfit to stand good and what's in it and test it. That's like the fox watching the hen house. And you better hope the guy down there at the sewer plant is doing his job and it doesn't go through and it's in the water system. I've made my point. I'd like the record and have it be known on the 28th, I believe, or that was the 30th. I like that when that incident happened when the dogs were out of town on the 28th.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Miller.
500 miles away.
Thank you. Now we'll move on. Assuming no additional public comment? Any additional public comment? Seeing no additional public comment, first item on the agenda is, our only item on the agenda this evening, Capital Improvement CIP Assistance Project update. And I would like to have us open up with Director Trumbull from Finance.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I don't have a lot prepared. I'm going to let the experts do most of the talking tonight, but about a year and a half ago or so, we really were talking about all of the capital needs that we have at the township. The township had deferred capital for years because of the economic downturn. And what we're faced with now is trying to really determine how much capital we need to be doing and how much we can do over the next few years. So kind of what's the priority, what are the essential needs today, and really over the next 5 years, just to figure out financially, what do we need? Do we need to issue debt? Where do we currently stand? So a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago or so, we started talking about trying to do our own inventory of all the capital, and we had a few staff people who were trying to go through building by building, and a couple of them are in the audience right now who were trying to do that. But to do that and to do their everyday jobs is just too much, and to try to price out how much it's going to cost and realistically what's behind the walls that we don't even know, electrical and whatnot. So we came forth to the board and asked if we could have people who knew how to kind of do these assessments, do this work for us, and therefore we brought OHM on board to help us with that. Another essential need besides budgeting and trying to figure out dollars from that regard, one of the questions that we get annually when we do our bond ratings is, do you have a capital improvement plan? And we've always been able to say yes, because we have one that expires in 2017. It really hasn't ever been directly tied to the budget. It's kind of, here's what we want to do over the next 5 years, and what we're really trying to do is prioritize. What are our needs? What are our wants? And being able to use that tool to, if this is our want and it's not our need, can we do that in 3 years down the road when financial times we expect to be better and whatnot? So that's what OHM is really helping us to do, and allowing us the ability to say, confidently with the bond rating agencies come on, yes, we have this plan as tied to our budget, and we absolutely can make adjustments to it as necessary if financial tough times come up. So that's from the CIP project that we have is going on from the finance and budget side.
Thanks, Wendy. There's really kind of two components to the project. Obviously, this is not the most sexy topic that the Township Board has ever heard a presentation on, but very important, probably frankly, one of the most important projects that we've ever undertaken. There's really two major components to it. One was being driven by a grant through the state of Michigan called SAW, which these guys will talk about in a minute. That has a major component to the project. And then the second component deals with kind of everything else. SAW is all about our sanitary collection system. But there's all these other areas of assets or categories of assets that we have, whether it's water or buildings or parking lots, parks, grounds, IT even down the road. But that's really the second component of this project. So it kind of worked out good that we got the SAW grant right about the time that we were looking for this assistance, so OHM was awarded that work. It is a multi-departmental effort. I think you'll see that tonight. Internally, Bob has been our lead from Public Works, and then Murat has really kind of been the lead from OHM's side, but they'll talk a little more specifically about their team in a minute. And then just kind of in closing, before we talk about the agenda, we've been a leader regionally in asset management for many years. Our existing CIP, which is expiring, is, it was a decent document, but if we want to continue to be a leader in this area, we need to kind of take it to the next step, like Wendy had mentioned. So what we're going to try and cover tonight are about 6 things, then leave it open for questions and answer. So there's going to be a brief introduction about asset management, talk about some of the changes going on at the state, why asset management is important, and what opportunities that presents for us. These guys will lay out the multidisciplinary project team that's been put together for the project, get a little overview on where we're at, some of the preliminary findings. They'll talk about the observations and opportunities kind of going forward. So some of the background about asset management, there's really kind of 5 components to a robust asset management plan. It starts with inventory. It includes, what condition is that inventory in? What kind of level of service do you expect out of that asset, whether it's a building, whether it's a park, whether it's a vehicle? Are you performing a risk analysis on those assets? How critical are certain risks or certain assets versus other assets? And have you properly identified the risks if that big water main along Cherry Hill Road fails? And then the final component of an asset management plan is funding it. So we did a current reality check when we started the project, when we issued our request for proposals, on kind of where, as staff, we thought we were at. So we took the various asset categories, which are listed down the left-hand side of that table, and then did a kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 assessment on where are we at. And if you blur your eyes a bit and kind of look at it, if it's white, it doesn't have a color, it means we're there, we've got it 100%. Things that are shaded green, we've almost got those, or we're close. In some cases, as we sit here today, we've got, those things nailed down, or some of those things further nailed down since May. And then the yellow is really where we needed the assistance from OHM. So if you kind of look at the columns, condition assessment, level of service, criticality, and some O&M strategy, especially as it pertains to facilities, parks, and golf courses, is where we need some additional assistance. So that was our current reality check going into the project, and then we brought OHM in through a competitive process, and they won out on that competition, and I'll turn it over to Murat to kind of take it from here.
All right. Thank you. My name is Murat, and distinguished panel members, participants, certainly be happy to be here with you and sharing this information with you. So we certainly, in respect of your time, will not want to take more than, 40 minutes or so. So what we wanted to do was to put the project into a broader regional, statewide context. There are certain things happening in the state. We here in Township are very cognizant of those, so we thought, let's share those with you and build on it and see how the project plugs into those anticipated changes coming down the pike. One of the things is what we refer to in short as SAW. It's the Stormwater Asset Management and Wastewater Grant and Loan Program that was had been approved in 2002 as part of a Great Lakes Water Quality Bond Initiative. And the governor had then decided that that money, part of which can be allocated to actually help municipalities deal with asset issues through an asset management program. In fact, nearly $500 million was allocated for municipalities. Canton Township had enough foresight to get on the bandwagon, secure nearly $2 million of grants that required some local match, as you can see the local match amount there, and was just awarded, and as soon as it was awarded, we have hit the road running, basically. In addition, the state of Michigan wanted to extend, seeing how successful the program has been, the state of Michigan decided to extend the requirements on the sanitary side to the water side, and what they said is, they sent out a letter to municipalities and said, by January 1, 2018, I need you to provide to me with a summary documentation on what you are doing on your water system, some kind of an asset management plan layout. In addition, the capital, as Wendy had mentioned, some of the bond rating agencies are now needing the CIP to be tied into annual budgets, and also, as has been mentioned before already, that the current CIP program is running out of its useful life, if you will, staying with engineering terminology here. So finally, then, even looking further ahead, some of you may already be aware, governor issued, the governor, from the governor's office, a report was issued, the 21st Century Infrastructure Commission report. One of its recommendations, out of many, one of its recommendations was to establish a statewide pilot. So the state is recognizing, I need an asset management program for the entire state. I'm going to ask municipalities to contribute. Some of you may be familiar with the Pazer road system. They want something akin to the Pazer road system to be implemented on the underground infrastructure. Canton Township was singled out, as Tim Fass mentioned, it was singled out as one of the community's important participants, and Bob, as a technical expert, has been participating in regional discussions about how to set this up, and Canton is playing an example role to show additional municipalities how this can be done. And I think you're contributing with data, with expertise, and such, right? Yeah. So just underlying where Canton Township is at, and as Tim mentioned, you certainly play a leadership role. I guess with big powers come big responsibilities, right? So we'll talk about some of the projects that we are taking on. So before delving into the details of the CIP project that we have undertaken, we wanted to kind of step back and talk about the multidisciplinary team. And I mean, this is just the face of the team, but there is such a huge number of other experts in the field outside this room that are helping with this project. So I didn't want to do injustice to them. Those names, we won't be able to mention them all. But for this project, though, maybe what we could do is perhaps go around the table and introduce some folks and their role on this project. If I can start with myself, my name is Murat. I am with OHM, and I'm happy to be the project manager of this project.
Sorry. Great. Well, you all know me already. Bob Belair, Public Works Manager.
And stunt double for Director.
I thought something was up there. I was wondering why he was pointing at me. I was wondering what I did wrong today. Boy. But, you know, as Murat mentioned, we have a team that's on the state committee. It's a group that's coming from both sides of the state, a group in Grand Rapids and a group that's formed around Detroit. It's put together by SEMCOG. So we're on that team, not just me from the township, but also Dave Maurice, our GIS specialist. He's providing a lot of the information and input as far as the actual attribute data that the state's going to be collecting. So he's kind of the technical guru side on what they really can ask for communities that's reasonable. You know, when we went into this, they wanted the world. They're using a company based in Australia to develop this asset management plan, and Australia is probably 15 or 20 years ahead of the U.S. on the asset side. So they're using this company, and they came in and they said, you should be able to provide us these items. And it was, everyone's jaw dropped when we saw it. We said, nobody has that information. We're probably one of the leaders in Canton, and we don't have half the information. So we really got them to scale it back to something that's reasonable for communities and agencies around the state to submit to them. So we think we're moving forward. We'll see how it goes down the road. I think in the next few months, they're going to take all this information and just kind of throw it in a pot, stir it around, and see what comes out of it to see really how this is going to work. But we are involved with it. Certainly, I've been tied to this project since its inception with the selection of OHM and working with them on a day-to-day, weekly basis, getting through this program. And certainly, the SAW grant is going full bore right now. We've got our crews out videotaping. We're having a kickoff meeting later this week with another contractor which we'll get into more of that detail as we go.
Thanks, Bob. My name is Kent Early. I'm one of the senior principals with OHM. And although my background's really underground infrastructure and SAW, we have a lot of people that have that type of background. My role on this project is really twofold. One, to make sure the project team has what they need to complete the project in your time frame. But even bigger is to kind of take a little step back. I operate as the community engineer for a number of municipalities. It's really to kind of take a look at what our team is putting together, and when I say our team, I'm talking about the OHM side, but also in conjunction with Bob and his folks to make sure that it makes sense and it's useful and it's what you guys can use to make decisions. I mean, part of this whole process from an overall capital improvement perspective is to put together a plan that ties into your budget, because you have limited resources, obviously, to try and address the needs of the residents, and frankly, to do it in the best bang for the buck manner. So, I mean, really, that's kind of where I'm approaching the project from, as well as, again, internally to OHM, making sure that the team has the resources they need.
Kent, maybe you can just introduce your staff, because otherwise you can't pick anything up on the microphone.
No problem. With us tonight, we have a couple of OHMers. Dave Lazinski is one of our project architects who's been heavily involved in, as Murat and Bob are kind of going through the various sections, heavily involved with the buildings component. And also we have John Tanner, who is leading the SAW part, the underground, particularly the wastewater, but also involved with the storm and water part of the asset management plan.
Does the information, because Watua is doing their own analysis, correct? Was your team part of their analysis as well? Through Watua? No?
No.
No, that was done by Stantec Consulting.
Stantec, got it.
Then the other team members internally, you've got Brad Sharp from Facilities, Bill Surchek from Engineering Services, and Deb Janis, Chief Accountant, who, we've got a pretty broad-reaching team beyond the three of us that have all been working on this. And like I stressed, very important project.
Oh, you, Murat.
And of course, there's you folks too, but you know that already.
Yeah.
The silent heroes, so. Alrighty, so maybe we can delve into the specificities of the current project then. We refer to it as the Capital Improvements Program Assistance Project. And just to paraphrase from the proposal, what the township desired was then we wanted to enhance the next generation of CIP for the years from 2017 to 2022. And you will see as we go through the presentation why the term next generation enhancement is appropriate. So if you wanted to bear with us for a few more minutes. The types of infrastructure that we are tackling, as you will see on the board there, is a myriad of underground infrastructure, but also a lot of above-ground infrastructure. So we had talked about the DEQ wanting the stormwater piece of the system, the sanitary, the water. Kenton stepped back and said, well, I got above ground. I got parks, I got trails, I want it all. If I touch it, I want to touch it all. Makes a lot of sense. One of the work products, as Wendy had mentioned in passing, but I'd like to revisit it, she had mentioned that as we go through this process, in the end, I would like to be able to have some kind of a tool that I can throw a bunch of data at it and do a bit modeling, if you will. Nothing rocket sciencey, if you will. Simple stuff just packaged together differently that makes sense. You put a bunch of if-then statements, a bunch of criteria, and let a program calculate through hundreds and hundreds of requests and identify the priorities, and then, of course, before it gets finalized, do another human touch, obviously. So, unless there are any questions about the project itself, what we thought you would find beneficial would be to hear some of the preliminary findings. Obviously, this project has been going on for a while. Quite some money has been spent on this. Well, what has it revealed, right? So if you'd like, maybe we can go into some of that. And we'll start with I think, Bob, you'll start us out with the below-ground infrastructure?
Always the most exciting, sanitary
course,
sewer.
Of course.
Right? So, we chose this one to start out with because this is one we're actually working on right now. We've got the SAW grant going. Our crews have been out there all summer videotaping, inspecting sewers, sending the information to OHM. They've been analyzing the data. So we're going to run through that real quick. Right now, oh,
Back?
yeah, go back one. So just real quick, I wanted to point out the numbers down here. 790 miles, that's a combination of our water and our sanitary system out there.
Pipes.
Yeah, pipes underground that people do not see. People don't realize they're there. It's something we have to make investments in, and we have to maintain these. You hear all the time throughout the government, throughout the state, throughout the nation, our infrastructure is crumbling. So we want to get ahead of that. That's the whole goal of this program. We estimate right now those assets are valued at $850 million. I had a consultant, he must have found my name on the internet or something last week, and he emailed me. It was funny. He said, hey, I want to sell you this program. I looked at your audits and everything, and I think your underground assets are valued at $700 million. You should be investing $7 million a year. And I replied, I said, no, you're actually low. We're at $850 million, and the nationally recognized reinvestment percentage is about 1% of your asset value. So they say you should be reinvesting about $8.5 million into your system every year. We're not at that. We do probably far better than most. We're probably in the couple $1 million range, but our system is newer also, so it requires a little less intense reinvestment at this point. Okay, talk about our sanitary system. This is just a snapshot of our manholes out there. We have 6,300 basically, or 6,250 township-owned manholes that are eligible for inspection. If you look at the SAW grant criteria, they will only fund inspection on systems that are over 20 years old. So you'll see the blue areas from the 60s up to the 90s. Those are the only systems we're looking at right now. So there's 6,200 of them. What OHM did, they went out there and did a snapshot of them. We feel our infrastructure is top-notch compared to everyone. We are out there inspecting it. We clean our system on a 5-year basis. We do a lot of stuff that other communities don't do. So instead of inspecting all of our manholes that fit that criteria, they said, all right, let's go out and let's look at about 400 of them. Various years, let's assess the condition, and then we can transfer that to the other ones. It's pretty good information. So they looked at 400 of them, made an assessment, and the information looks great. Right here you can kind of see it. The one thing to preface this with is we're using a scale from 0 to 5. 0 is perfect, brand new condition. 5 is you better get out and replace it right now. So from the manholes that were assessed, the structural rating on them came out to be an average of 0.64. Very good condition. The O&M rating, the operation and maintenance, about 2. So it's similar to a PACER rating. A lot of people hear PACER ratings 1 to 5 or 0 to 5. We're trying to make that same assessment with our sanitary sewer system. Our O&M's a 2. It's a very good PACER rating. I'd love to have roads that were all 2s in Canton. So they're in very reasonable condition. Some of the stuff we've been doing, just an update on this. Actually, you all saw it a couple weeks ago. You saw a request come across for Red Zone Robotics. That's the company we're going to be contracting with to go out and perform video inspections on a majority of our system. It's an outfit that comes in and they have all the equipment, manpower, they can come in and just bust through this stuff. Not like our crew of 2 and our 1 truck. So in the interim, since we got this SAW grant earlier this year, we started jumping ahead and we started inspecting lines ourselves. So you can see right here, snapshot of what our crews have been able to do just this summer. Just our 1 truck, we've done a little over 11 miles of inspection, sent that information over to OHM, and they've analyzed it. The way the SAW grant was established, we said we would inspect about 30% of our system in-house, just as a match for the grant system. The overall condition rating, you can see this is just a fancy bar chart showing that we're in really good shape. The one thing I pointed out is we're at about 92% of our entire manholes or our pipes so far are sub 3 rating. So a sub 3 pacer rating. It's really good. But it's a small portion we've gotten done so far. A lot of it's going to come out in the next several months or a year once we get red zone out there busting through the rest of it.
For the 11 miles you've done, I'm sorry, Steve.
Go ahead.
For the 11 miles you've done, when was that put in the ground?
We were trying to focus on, probably most of it in the 70s. Yeah, majority.
Older.
Yep.
I
Yep.
had the same question, basically, why were you starting up there? Is that where the oldest
Yeah.
parts?
Yeah, that's the oldest part of our community, if you look up there. So we're focusing on that. One thing we're doing also, we as a township, we're focusing on the smaller pipes, the 12-inch and below. Those are easier for us to videotape, and it's more attuned to our equipment that we utilize. We can do the larger pipes, but it's a slow process. You bring these companies in, they have very advanced, extremely expensive equipment that's remotely operated, and they dispatch it into the system. And then they actually take the information, send it to their facility, which is a whole nother remote facility. I picture a bunch of guys around a room looking at sanitary videos all day, and they code them. Sounds fun, doesn't it? So it is a small portion we've done so far. You can see there's a typical picture of a sanitary man or a pipe that we encounter out in the field. Probably fats, oils, and greases.
That's a good one or a bad one?
That's a bad one.
Bad one.
Yeah,
Looks bad.
it's surprising. You know, over a couple of years ago, I went out with Jerry Leica. He's our main operator. He's been with the township for about 30 years. And I said, I'm curious about this one pipe that now runs directly under the Rouge River. It was put in 1963. I said, let's go look at this thing. So we went out and looked at it, and I was amazed at the condition. It's old concrete pipe, 24 inches. You could still read the dates on the inside of the pipe with our camera equipment.
Jerry loves to have people go for a ride-along, so
Yeah.
but he wants to, go for
Yeah,
it.
if you want to go, let me know.
That'd be interesting.
It's a great afternoon. Just don't go before lunch.
So those are all like roots and things like that? Or?
I'm sure that's joint intrusion, so it's probably a mixture of fats, oils, and greases, and then calcium deposit. So whenever there's a joint that leaks a little bit, the minerals from the groundwater they calcify. What we'll do when we see something like that, we'll get with our cleaning crews. They'll put a jet head down there, usually that same day, jet them out, clean it, pull all that debris out. All right,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
So I guess from my perspective, one of the key takeaways from this earlier part of the presentation is that the underground infrastructure appears to be in reasonable condition. However, at the same time, yes, it is young infrastructure, but it is aging. So the anticipation is, yes, today it's good, tomorrow is good, but let's make sure we keep an eye on it because things are aging, and as they age, they progress toward deterioration faster. So stepping back then and changing gears and shifting our focus onto the above ground infrastructure, what we would like to do then is to share with you some of our findings here. Before proceeding further into the above ground infrastructure side of things, then what I'm wondering is this, I'd like to quiz you if I may. So the underground infrastructure, what was the approximate replacement value?
850 million?
850 million. Mr. Williams, you got it. So, and I'd like you to remember that number because we'll do a little comparison. So on the above ground infrastructure, stepping back a little bit, I read this interesting article once where it stated that what is visible to the naked eye is only about 10% or less of the world. And when you look at some of the replacement value of the above ground infrastructure and compare it with the underground, you'll probably see a similar percentage emerging here. So in terms of the above ground assets, these are only a few of the infrastructure we touched, and we'll show you what we mean by having touched them. and look at the approximate replacement value of that infrastructure and then think about how it compares and contrasts against the below ground infrastructure. Yes, there's a stock difference, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this is less valuable. Obviously, this is what folks see. The below ground stuff folks may not see. It's got perhaps severe consequences, but nonetheless, this is of value as well. So what we would like to do is, without necessarily getting into too much detail, if I may, if you allow me to have us stay more on a planar 30,000-foot level, if that's okay, what I would like to just demonstrate to you is with 4 examples, the type of investigations we have done on the above ground. So on the below ground, for example, we talked about technology, robots going in, 0 to 5 ratings, and so on and so forth. Excuse me. On the above ground, we may not have used robots, although Dave was going to use one of those drones that you guys have. But, we, in the last minute, decided, no, let's just not go for that. So he did. We went up the roof. We went inside places. We looked at carpets. We looked at the exterior walls, concrete slabs. We did a thorough assessment. And we also used the scaling akin to the 0 to 5 rating. We used a 0 to 4 or something. But it's very similar. There is a rating process associated with it. We looked at... and as I'm talking with you, maybe I can share with you some other facilities. We looked at building envelopes, building interiors, HVAC, electrical systems, and these images then just show you the level of detail we went into in evaluating the assets. So having said that, I'd like to share with you, this table looks a bit busy, but if we were to break it down, I think you will see some broad perspective results jumping at you right away, I'm hoping. So let's see. I was going to use the mouse as a pointer. That doesn't work. The laser doesn't work. Okay, so let's see here. On the far left side, we have obviously the buildings that have been evaluated thus far. Going across the top, then we have broken out the needs in terms of site conditions, building envelope, building interior, HVAC, electrical, and so on. And what you see in terms of dollars here are, please, these are preliminary, by the way, so please don't take those just yet as too much of face value. We are undergoing quite a bit of evaluation, but this is just a quick snapshot of right now where we are at. What does it look like? This will be refined. So what you will see then is you look at this total and you are saying, oh my gosh, Murat, stop a minute. You are telling me that in the next 5 years, I need to spend about $11 million some dollars on my above ground infrastructure assets. Wait a minute here, right? Maybe you aren't saying it, but some of you may be thinking that. So let's build on that. What does that mean? We wanted to put that number into a larger context for you. And I really liked the context that Bob used. He said, he gave you a percentage. He said, this percent of the replacement value is usually the industry standard of what is expected in terms of reinvestment rate. That's what we want to get at with this. So the 11 million, keep that in mind. On the far right side, we did an approximation of the replacement value of your infrastructure. Okay, so we have a replacement value, we have total 5-year budget, and then you have this thing called, it's a mouthful, percent 5-year cost of estimated replacement value. So what that is yearly needed percent return that this infrastructure calls for. If you look at the very bottom, the average is 3. When you look around literature and some industry rule of thumb values, there are numbers ranging between 1 to 3, 2 to 4%. So basically, as Bob mentioned, he mentioned the 1%. There is, experts haven't necessarily agreed upon what that specific value ought to be, but they have agreed on a range. Let's call it 2 to 4%. Usually it is good practice to put about 2 to 4% of the replacement value of your infrastructure back into your system. Currently, it appears as though you are right in that range. So the number appears high, but if you put it into a context, hopefully it's beneficial to you. I don't know. We try to provide you a variety of contexts to think about. Before leaving this slide, then perhaps one more thing to point out to you, which may be of interest or of curiosity to some of you. You noticed Pheasant Run, there is a 20%. That's kind of an outlier, right? It's like, wait a minute, everything is nicely cozying around 1, 2, 3, 4, and what's about this 20%? The biggest driver there is what is referred to as the HMA, hot mixed asphalt cart pathways. They are falling apart. So of course, then we are in the process of making assessments about what is the value of it, how much of it should be invested, in what way, and that's where Wendy comes in. Okay, I understand, but let's step back. If the paths are bad and it doesn't cause any safety hazard issues, do I need to spend the money on it right now or not? Those are all decisions that need to happen, but that's part of why that is this big outlier over there.
So before you go, just on that, like in the Pheasant Run, I mean, are there other considerations put into here, like maybe not use asphalt, maybe make it gravel, or something like that? Or
Oh, absolutely. Great thoughts, and I think we'll be evaluating those. Yeah, absolutely.
Bring it up. I mean, as we replace sections, making those gravel, and
Mhm,
it's all gravel
mhm,
or something,
mhm,
maintaining gravel might be cheaper. But even you had like aluminum windows earlier. I mean, you're just saying replace aluminum windows because they're a certain age, or did you actually take heat studies to see if there were broken seals or anything, or
No heat studies, Dave.
how do you come up?
Yeah. Yeah.
For the most part, thanks. I believe that was on Victory Park. Is that the one?
The admin building.
Oh, the admin building, yeah. Those are the original, the 1984 windows. So those are at the end of their life, expected life. So that's why those are on there. If we had shown the full spreadsheet, it would show a rating of 1.5, which means that the window's working properly, but within 1 to 5 years, we expect it to be at the end of the life. And in that case, I believe they are past their life expectancy. So they're still working, but they should be replaced soon, and we shouldn't expect them to continue working, indefinitely. So
these lists, I mean, are there is everything prioritized by building, in terms of how you looked at it, or overall?
Oh, so great question you're asking. That's actually the next steps category, if you allow me to continue. Great question. The whole process of prioritization, how to rank it based on what criteria and so on and so forth, we'd like to touch upon that. That's the next phase of this project. And we'd like to share with you how we are thinking about doing it so that you get a better context instead of just saying, oh, it's going to be prioritized. Well, wait a minute. What do you mean? How? What is going to be used? So we'd like to share some of those thoughts with you in the next section. Okay. So if we were to then step away from the details of the above and below ground infrastructure preliminary findings and wanted to think about some key observations and key opportunities moving forward, these are what we identified. Firstly, as you hopefully have developed an appreciation for, is that, yes, we have a young system, young underground infrastructure. It is currently in good condition, similar with the above ground infrastructure, but it is nearing its useful life. Good maintenance is going to make it continue be effective, but I guess it would behoove us to be prepared to start thinking about, hey, I need to potentially invest somewhat more moving forward in my infrastructure. And that, of course, then hinges upon a level of service discussion Tim Fawcett mentioned. Investments tied to expectations. There is a certain set of expectations, spoken or unspoken, that will have to be met. Those expectations will probably have to be fleshed out some more and more brought up from the unconscious level to the conscious level, if you will. We have to specifically say, this is what I expect. And if you expect that, it will have a dollar value associated with it. But without talking about what is expected, usually when folks see dollar values, there is a shock factor. But if you look at it, if you cushion it in the context of expectations, maybe the conversation shifts. So that's where we would like to end up at some point. In terms of key opportunities, we identified broad 3 key opportunities. Firstly, this process, it was happening before, but especially in the context of data and quantifications, this interdisciplinary team is coming together and an interdisciplinary approach is being taken to prioritization. With one caveat, not a bad caveat, it's a good caveat, and I think Tim wanted me, if I remember correctly, Tim, you wanted me to remind folks of that, which is, yes, we deal with above and below ground infrastructure, but they are, the needs of those are addressed under different budget contexts. They don't necessarily bleed across each other. So that bifurcation will have to continue. Correct, Tim? I don't know whether there's anything else you would like to add. Okay. As we were going through this process, the entire team certainly recognizes this. We are dealing with hundreds of miles of infrastructure, each of which is going to have hundreds of data points, hundreds of above ground infrastructure. We have been maintaining this on spreadsheets. That's good, but as data builds up, is spreadsheet the right way to go? There are software out there. Is that maybe a better repository? Those things are being explored right now as we speak. And finally, we do want to be thinking 10 chess moves ahead, 15 chess moves ahead. As you may be cognizant, this whole infrastructure is becoming smarter, if you will. Technology is catching up with municipalities. They have already caught up with the gas, electrical sector, and so on and so forth. Well, it is inevitable. It's catching up with us. So are there opportunities that Canton can leverage, given the technological and internal expertise we have, which may end up resulting in attracting younger talent to the community, which then has positive ramifications? That is the potential next vision, if you will, but we aren't quite there yet. I don't know whether there is anything else you would like to add, Tim, on this or not.
Yeah, just very briefly, the Smart Cities Council is still out there. They're, pitching proposals for communities to apply for grants to determine your readiness to become a smart city, and then eventually get the kind of money that the city of Columbus got last year, which coincidentally, OHM was one of the lead consultants in the application that was made for the Smart Cities grant that Columbus got, and presumably will be working on their projects for many years now.
So as promised, next steps in terms of we would like to go. So perhaps we can contextualize next steps with some key milestones. We have a calendar year ahead of us. By the end of this year, we are certainly on target for wrapping up the above ground infrastructure inventory side of things. Moving into next year, we want to tackle below ground infrastructure. I had mentioned to you some DEQ requirements on the water side and on the sewer side, and those are coming up in years 2018 and 2019, and we are certainly positioned to be able to meet those targets. In fact, what John is trying to do is this. The SAW grant requirements are due toward the fourth quarter of 2019, around October. But John definitely, and I think our entire team is poised for that aim, which is we want to finish in the first quarter of 2019. In terms of prioritization, next steps, this is where we want to be. Some kind of a tool, some kind of a spreadsheet tool or software tool. I think this needs to be fleshed out as we move forward, but some kind of a mechanism that basically allows us to take the data, do some kind of a prioritization on the data based on condition, based on needs, based on value, community value, safety, and all these parameters. That then creates an initial cut that says out of this much projects, you should be tackling this. And then Wendy and team will have to make a decision and say, okay, out of 100 projects that I prioritize that I need, I want to tackle 50. Should I tackle 50? What if I tackled 40? What is the ramification 5 years down the road? Let's make it 60. What is the budget ramification? Those scenarios, perturbations will probably have to occur. And I don't know what your future vision is, whether you want to come back to the council with some simulations or not. I guess that all needs to be determined at some point, you think?
Correct. I mean, we've already shown the board the 2018 budget, so to the extent that we'd have to change some of that because of urgent priorities, we would definitely be bringing that forth to the board. We typically discuss capital needs at the board level during budgeting time, but I imagine wherever this ends up, which I imagine the needs of capital are going to be far greater than what we budgeted, would be my sense, which would end up in a similar study session discussing what direction the board would like to head. So I would envision that after you guys are done with your part of the study.
And I believe because the Watua systems may be a little bit simpler, their look and where we ended up as a board with that data was looked out over the next 20 years, what kind of investment would be required with some pretty significant, tens of millions of dollars over time. And as a board decided, okay, we know where we're headed, and there's going to be peaks and valleys of when that spending is going to occur. And to take that hit in any single year would be devastating. So let's do some smoothing in our budgeting so we're ready for the big ones when it's time. And I think we're smart enough here, we could do that with this data once it's matured to the point that we can start doing the analysis and running the different scenarios out.
Absolutely.
So that's the end goal, right?
I would suspect what'll happen is there's going to be some urgent current needs that is not going to be fulfilled with the current budget, but once we can get some of our current needs done, we'll probably be recommending setting aside money in community improvement or capital improvement fund, and every year saying we're going to spend $1.5 million or $2 million or whatever it is, we're going to put that aside in this other fund. So then when we do have, rainy days and a lot of stuff hits all at the same time, we can address those items at that point in time.
Because when the economy tanked for us back 2000, 2007, 8, we weren't really prepared, and we didn't have, peanuts set aside to deal with it, right?
Correct.
So we delayed capital improvement projects. Now, when we're to the point we're coming back, what I want to do is be a little smarter the next time, right?
Correct.
And we can do that, I think, with this data, which is the
absolutely.
intention.
Which is what?
Which is the intention.
Absolutely correct.
Of everything
Yes.
we're doing.
So as part of your component prioritization, is that where you would do your comparables? Like, okay, instead of bringing it back to asphalt or putting in these kind of windows, this is an alternative, and I mean, you'll be doing that for everything. Okay.
And before leaving this slide, one last thing to mention here is this, and Greg had early on had pointed that out. I guess for the lack of a better term, I'm going to call it deferment consequence. If there is something that doesn't make the list and you defer it, we want to see the potential impact of that so that we make a better decision in terms of, okay, these peaks and valleys, let's make sure we defer the right project. It would be the idea. I think that's all the material that we have had, unless you have, I guess we'd be happy to continue entertaining questions and have a further discussion about it.
Based on your experience with Columbus, and I know you've talked to Tim, you have a lot of residents here that are interested in the smart city also, but based on your experience with Columbus, OHM, what do you see around Canton that we could use for the smart cities? What kind of projects?
Well, actually, I have to admit, I was really inspired by Tim Foss's vision. When he looked around town and some of the things he shared with me, I was like, wow, okay, this is even better than what Columbus did. Well, I don't want to exaggerate,
Yes,
but...
it is. It's better than
It's better, right?
That's our new motto.
It's only,
It's better than
it's
Columbus. Yeah, better
hey,
than Columbus.
we got the right motto now.
They can't hear us.
The one thing I can maybe mention, Tim and I, when we were talking, he shared some of vision elements of his with me, and a couple stuck with me. And maybe I can start out the conversation with one, Tim, and maybe you can layer onto it. One thing he mentioned was, and I'm going to be using my words. He had more elegant words, but I'm going to just be using this 24/7 customer service. This community is becoming dynamic enough where contractors are coming in, folks are coming in, young, old, they need different services, and they don't necessarily abide by 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Well, if I want to continue attracting these customers, be dynamic, can I set something up that is like a 24/7 kind of a process with machine learning, artificial intelligence? Simple stuff, obviously. You can't, at this stage, replace human interaction, but can we make our services more available to folks outside a traditional context? Right? That was one thing, for example, Tim.
Yeah, correct. We don't want the residents to have to wait until Monday at 8:30 when we open in order to file a complaint or give us a concern regarding something that they find, whether it's in a park or in a neighborhood that they find on the weekend. So they should be able to get online and have an interaction digitally with us during the weekend when it's convenient for them, rather than having to be beholden to the hours that we're open. So that's definitely one of the components that is in the MSD strategic plan and is part of many of the conversations that Murat and others and I have been having for a couple of years now.
Is there something that is in your mind, perhaps, that you think, what, wait a minute.
Like, oh, no.
I mean, if you'd like to share, I'd be curious to hear.
Well, we have a lot of things, yeah. I mean, we have smart traffic lights, and so,
Yes.
adjusting the timing that
Yeah.
way. We also have a lot of kids, a lot of STEM programs here in the schools. Maybe use the data that we collect and have kids do a hackathon and create some apps for us.
Ooh, my gosh, great thinking.
So we've got lots of ideas.
Okay, fantastic.
I think, the big three that we've been discussing over the last year or so have been some smart water technology, to do something collectively, either with the adjacent communities, or even if it's just Canton alone, to do something more that would be able to drive us to getting to at least bi-monthly or maybe monthly water bills, water and sewer bills.
Yeah.
And, reading those on a fixed-based system as opposed to having to drive through the neighborhoods. So there's some initiatives there that we've, kind of preliminarily started exploring. As Murat mentioned, the 24/7, 365 City Hall, if you want to call it that, services. And then the transportation technology, which that's a big collective effort with MDOT and Wayne County. At this point, mostly MDOT. But, we're already having some of those discussions as well, which kind of parlays into a little bit of the work that the Technology Committee kind of uncovered last week, so.
Tim, one thing that was mentioned was an asset management system, and that's something we've talked about for the 5 years I've been on the board, but is that something we will be looking at purchasing and implementing?
Yeah, I think, so there's really kind of two components of that. There's the asset management plan, which is what we've been building for, 25 years. We've done a lot of that work, or a lot of really good work in the last 3 or 4 years towards that end. OHM will help us carry that ball across the finish line in the next couple of years here, as Murat pointed out. But the question that Murat raised was, we're exploring whether or not we need software beyond spreadsheets in order to manage all this data going forward. We've had a couple presentations from vendors. We've talked with the Oakland County Water Resources Commission and the City of Ann Arbor, which are, again, kind of two of the other leaders in Southeast Michigan in that area. And they've done some detailed explorations of those softwares and made some decisions. So our team still needs to evaluate that and then, come back with a recommendation. Wendy and I kind of jokingly have said, we feel very comfortable with the spreadsheet type approach.
Yeah.
But, she's got mad skills in that area, and, it's kind of one of those things where that'll get us by. But for how long? And then at what point are we going to need something that's more robust than a spreadsheet-based system? And-
Will the work that OHM has done and your team has done be sufficient to populate a software pack?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what we heard from both Oakland County and from Ann Arbor, who have been also working with these guys.
So you're thinking of like maybe a dashboard, so an interface which would be easier?
Yeah, well,
work with?
you know, each software has its own set of bells and buzzers, or bells and whistles, so we don't know yet. And again, I think Oakland County was leaning towards having something that was more kind of graphical and more dashboard style-like looking, and I think Ann Arbor at one point was maybe not thinking that was where they wanted to go, but I don't know if Ann Arbor has made their decision now
They
on
have
software,
made
but
their decision, yep,
yeah,
yep.
so we need to think that through. It's another cost that we haven't kind of put in the equation yet, but we'll figure that out probably, I would guess, in the next 3 to 4 months, would you think?
Yep, I would think so.
But with that, too, I'm looking for commonality between MSD and leisure services, if at all possible, right? Greg?
Right, and one of the factors that we started talking about with a software package versus a spreadsheet is the commonality between MSD and leisure services and everybody else that needs to be in there and accessing the data. When it's a spreadsheet, the more hands that are in the pot, the more likely you can corrupt the data and accidentally delete a formula or change a cell, and then the whole thing kind of becomes a big puzzle to try and put back together. And if it's a software that this person only has access to these certain parameters, it's less likely to get corrupted. So that's kind of why we were talking about that as an option as well.
I guess while we're on the topic, just so you don't get blown away when you see the recommendation, to put it in context, Phase 1 of the software component for Oakland County was $200,000. Phase 2 was an additional $250,000. So where they're Phase 1 and Phase 2, they're $450,000 just on the software side in order to manage their SAW-only components of assets. So only this 39 sanitary sewer systems that they operate. So,
Did
you
they-
know, it's a,
Were there grants involved to help them fund?
yeah, but the SAW grants are limited. Each SAW grant, I think, is capped at $160,000 for the software. And it depends on the size and the amount of the ward and everything. We have 160 in our SAW formula, in our grant, and we haven't really kind of made any commitments yet. I don't think, have we, Bob, software-wise?
But you know, in spirit of we can do better, we can do better.
There are a lot of software engineers in Canton, too. Run a lot of software companies out of their homes.
Right, right. So we can do better.
Any additional board questions, comments? So none. I think that covers the agenda for the evening.
Thank you. Thanks for the good work.
Thank you.
Could we have no additional comment? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor? Aye. Thank you, gentlemen.